James stood in his fancy apartment, holding the invitation to his ex-girlfriend Isabelle's wedding. The news of her upcoming marriage hit him like a punch to the gut, harder than he had ever anticipated. A year ago, she had walked out of his life, citing his relentless focus on work and an inability to prioritize their relationship. Now, as he stared at the glossy invitation, James was overwhelmed by a tumultuous mix of sadness and bitterness. The thought of attending the wedding alone sent a chill down his spine, amplifying his sense of dread for the event that loomed just days away. Later that day, as James navigated the bustling city streets, he spotted a woman sitting quietly in a corner. Her clothes were worn and frayed, and her hair fell messily around her shoulders. But despite her challenging circumstances, she wore a kind smile that seemed to radiate warmth. There was something undeniably dignified about her demeanor that caught James's attention. He found himself stopping and looking at her longer than usual, curiosity piqued by the contrast between her situation and her spirit. "Hi," James said, approaching her with a hesitant smile. "I'm James." The woman looked up, her expression a mix of surprise and caution. "Hi, I'm Charlotte," she replied softly, returning his smile with a gentle warmth that made him feel unexpectedly at ease. Something about Charlotte drew James in like a moth to a flame, compelling him to engage in conversation. From the moment they began to talk, he found himself captivated by her quiet strength and unwavering resilience, which radiated from her with every word. Charlotte spoke candidly about the hardships life had thrown her way. Each struggle she faced was a chapter in her story that only served to enhance her character. She revealed how she had navigated through adversity, often emerging stronger and more compassionate, all without losing her kindness or hope for a brighter future. Each word she shared struck a chord within James, echoing in the depths of his heart and deepening his admiration for her spirit. He was mesmerized not only by her tales of endurance, but also by the way she carried herself with dignity and grace, despite the weight of her experiences. He felt a profound connection growing between them, one that transcended the barriers of their differing worlds. As she spoke, he couldn't help but notice the light in her eyes, a spark of passion that ignited his own desire to learn more about her. It was as if she had a way of drawing him into her world, where hope reigned supreme amidst chaos, and where kindness was a powerful force. In a moment of impulsive compassion, driven by a blend of curiosity and a longing to escape the impending wedding and the loneliness that came with it, James made an unexpected proposal. "Would you like to come to a wedding with me?" he asked, his voice laced with sincerity and a hint of vulnerability. "My ex-girlfriend is getting married, and I could really use some company. I promise to make sure you have a nice dress, a good meal, and a chance to experience something different." The spontaneity of his request surprised even him, yet it felt right, as if the universe had conspired to bring them together at that moment. He hoped that this unexpected adventure might not only provide a welcome distraction from his own heartache, but also allow Charlotte to step into a world filled with possibilities, laughter, and perhaps even a flicker of joy. Charlotte blinked in surprise, taken aback by his unexpected invitation. "You want me to be your date to a wedding?" she asked, her brow furrowed in disbelief as she searched his face for any hint of insincerity. Was this some sort of joke? "Yes," James replied, nodding enthusiastically, a hopeful grin spreading across his face like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Why not? You deserve a day to feel special, and honestly, I could use the company. It's a celebration, and it wouldn't feel right going alone." Charlotte hesitated for a moment, weighing the strangeness of the offer against the intrigue it sparked within her. She had never imagined herself as someone who would be invited to a wedding, let alone as a date, especially not in such an unorthodox manner. But something in his earnest expression compelled her. Finally, a small smile broke across her face, her heart racing with excitement and a hint of apprehension. "All right, James, I'll go with you." Little did either of them know that this spontaneous decision would ignite a series of events that would change the course of both their lives forever. As James walked away from that street corner, a buoyant sense of anticipation enveloped him, an inexplicable thrill coursing through his veins. He had not only found a companion for the wedding, but perhaps someone who might just open his heart in ways he hadn't considered before. Thoughts of their impending adventure danced in his mind, and he couldn't help but feel that this connection with Charlotte was destined to blossom into something meaningful. True to his word, he took her to one of the city's most exclusive boutiques, a place that shimmered with elegance and luxury. As they walked through the grand entrance, Charlotte's eyes widened in awe at the lavish surroundings that felt almost like a dream. Rows of designer dresses hung gracefully, sparkling jewelry twinkled under the soft lights, and elegant shoes were displayed like exquisite pieces of art on delicate pedestals. For a brief moment, she felt utterly out of place, her worn clothes contrasting sharply with the opulence that surrounded her. The sheer extravagance of the store made her self-conscious, but James's warm, encouraging presence gave her the courage to step further inside. "Go on, explore," he urged, gesturing toward a stunning dress that shimmered like starlight. "You deserve to feel like a princess for a day." His enthusiasm was infectious, and as Charlotte moved through the boutique, running her fingers along the luxurious fabrics and letting the rich colors envelop her, she began to forget her reservations. At that moment, surrounded by beauty and possibility, she could almost envision a version of herself that felt deserving of such splendor, ready to embrace a life filled with joy and adventure. But when James flashed her a reassuring smile, a warmth spread through Charlotte, infusing her with the confidence she desperately needed to take a step forward. With each step she took into the boutique, the air crackled with possibility. At first, the boutique staff regarded Charlotte with a mix of curiosity and indifference, their polished smiles revealing little of their true thoughts. It was clear they were unaccustomed to clients who didn't fit their usual mold, most likely affluent and self-assured. Yet, when James made it unmistakably clear that he was there to help Charlotte find the perfect outfit, their attitudes shifted dramatically. The staff's demeanor transformed as they recognized that this was not just another shopping trip, but a moment of significance. They quickly sprang into action, bringing out their finest dresses, shoes, and accessories, treating Charlotte with the same care and attention they would give to any wealthy patron. As the staff worked their magic, Charlotte felt a whirlwind of emotions crashing over her. Excitement fluttered in her chest, nervousness made her palms sweat, and a touch of disbelief hung in the air like a faint whisper. It was hard to believe she was even in this luxurious space, surrounded by fabrics that shimmered like treasures. The stylist draped elegant fabrics around her shoulders and pinned her hair into soft, cascading waves that framed her face beautifully. They applied makeup that enhanced her features, adding just the right amount of blush and shimmer to make her glow. Each brush stroke felt like a gentle nudge toward a more confident version of herself. When they finally slipped her into a stunning dress that fit her like it had been crafted just for her, Charlotte could hardly breathe. As she stood in front of the full-length mirror, her heart raced with anticipation. When she finally caught a glimpse of herself in the glass, she could hardly recognize the woman staring back. She looked elegant, confident, and undeniably beautiful. Yet, more importantly, she felt a spark of hope igniting within her, a feeling she hadn't experienced in far too long. This was not just about the dress. It was a metamorphosis, a shedding of the layers of self-doubt that had clung to her for years. In that moment, surrounded by the luxury of the boutique and the unexpected kindness of its staff, Charlotte began to realize that life held the potential for transformation and joy, even in the most unexpected of circumstances. The weight of her past seemed to lift, replaced by the exhilarating prospect of a future filled with possibilities. With each passing second, she felt herself blossom, ready to embrace the world outside the boutique with newfound courage and grace. As they emerged from the boutique, the late afternoon sun cast a golden hue around them, creating an almost magical atmosphere. Charlotte turned to James, her eyes shimmering with gratitude and disbelief, reflecting the joy and transformation she felt inside. "Thank you, James," she said, her voice thick with emotion, almost cracking under the weight of her feelings. "I've never felt like this before. It's overwhelming, but in the best way possible." The words spilled out like a dam breaking, revealing a flood of emotions she had long suppressed. James returned her gaze with a genuine smile, his heart swelling with happiness as he witnessed her remarkable transformation. "You deserve it, Charlotte. You're so much more than what life has thrown at you. he replied, his words imbued with sincerity and warmth, as if he were offering her a promise of brighter days ahead. Later that evening, they settled into a cozy corner of a quiet cafe, the warm glow of the lights creating an intimate atmosphere that wrapped around them like a comforting blanket. The rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the sweet scent of pastries, making the space feel even more inviting. As they sipped their drinks, the barriers between them began to dissolve, washed away by the warmth of the moment and the genuine connection they were building. Charlotte took a deep breath, gathered her thoughts, and began to share her story, one that revealed the layers of hardship she had endured, each word painting a vivid picture of resilience and strength. She spoke candidly about her once stable life, detailing how she had fallen on hard times after losing her job, a position she had held for years, which had provided not just income, but also a sense of identity. The transition from stability to uncertainty had been jarring, like stepping off a cliff into the unknown. Her narrative was punctuated with the struggles she faced while living on the streets, moments of loneliness that loomed like dark clouds over her spirit, threatening to overshadow the flickers of hope she clung to. She recounted nights spent shivering under a thin blanket, the harsh sounds of the city echoing around her as she longed for warmth and safety. Yet, amidst the despair, she found hope in the small acts of kindness from strangers, people who offered her food or shared a smile, gestures that reignited her faith in humanity. With each story, James felt himself drawn deeper into her world, understanding the gravity of her experiences and the strength it took to endure them. As Charlotte spoke, her eyes lit up with the memories of those moments of grace, illuminating the shadows of her past. She described how those seemingly insignificant gestures acted as lifelines, pulling her back from the brink and reminding her that kindness existed, even in the darkest corners of life. Charlotte's voice trembled slightly as she recalled the feeling of gratitude that overwhelmed her each time someone reached out, and James listened intently, moved by the depth of her vulnerability and resilience. In this cozy cafe, their souls began to intertwine, building a bridge between their lives that neither of them had expected to traverse. James listened intently, his respect for Charlotte deepening with each word she spoke. He admired her resilience, the way she had faced life's challenges head-on, and the grace with which she had navigated through such adversity. Each detail she shared added layers to her character, transforming her from a stranger into someone he felt he could trust. Charlotte's ability to find beauty in the small moments of kindness in a world that often felt indifferent resonated deeply with him, awakening something within him that had long been dormant. In turn, he felt compelled to open up about his own struggles, a desire to reciprocate the trust she had shown him. As he spoke, the words flowed more freely than he had anticipated, revealing how the relentless pressure to succeed in his career had caused him to neglect his relationship with Isabelle. He described the sleepless nights spent worrying about deadlines and the unrelenting demands of his job, explaining how they had consumed his life to the point where he lost sight of what truly mattered. The guilt and pain that lingered in the wake of their breakup were raw and palpable, emotions he had kept bottled up for far too long. As he shared his story, he felt a cathartic release, as if the weight of his unspoken feelings was finally lifted. For the first time, James felt free to express his vulnerabilities without fear of judgment, a rarity in his life filled with expectations and pressures. As they conversed, a genuine connection began to blossom between them, rooted in mutual respect, empathy, and understanding. Each story they shared seemed to strengthen the invisible bond forming in the cozy cafe, where laughter and conversation blended seamlessly with the comforting aroma of coffee. They found solace in each other's experiences, realizing that, despite their vastly different backgrounds, they had both fought their own battles and emerged stronger for it. The pain of their pasts no longer felt like a burden, but rather a shared testament to their strength and resilience. James marveled at how this connection was blossoming so effortlessly, as if fate had intertwined their paths at precisely the right moment. He found himself captivated by Charlotte's spirit, her ability to laugh even when recalling the most challenging times. Her laughter was like music to his ears, a sound that brightened the dim corners of his heart. Meanwhile, Charlotte felt a warmth spreading within her, a newfound sense of belonging that she had been longing for amidst the chaos of her life. The cafe, once a mere backdrop to their conversation, transformed into a sanctuary where they could be their authentic selves, free from the masks they wore in the outside world. The day of the wedding finally arrived, and as Charlotte stepped out of the dressing room in her stunning gown, she looked like a completely transformed woman. The change was not merely physical. It was as if a light had ignited within her, illuminating her spirit and casting aside the shadows of her past. The elegant fabric hugged her curves in all the right places, flowing beautifully as she moved. She now carried herself with a renewed sense of confidence and dignity that radiated from within, her posture straight and her head held high. Her hair cascaded around her shoulders in soft waves, and her makeup accentuated her features, enhancing her natural beauty without overshadowing it. James couldn't help but feel a swell of pride for Charlotte and the journey she had undertaken in just a few short days. He remembered the shy, uncertain woman he had first met, and now here she stood, embodying grace and strength. The change was astonishing, a testament to her inner resilience and the power of their connection. He took a moment to appreciate her, letting the sight sink in, realizing how lucky he was to be by her side on such a significant day. "Are you ready?" he asked, offering her his arm, a small gesture that felt monumental in that moment. Charlotte met his gaze with a determined smile, her eyes sparkling with newfound hope and excitement. "Yes, I am," she replied, her voice steady and full of resolve, echoing the confidence she had cultivated over the past few days. Together, they walked out of the apartment, their footsteps in sync, ready to face whatever the day might bring. The anticipation hung in the air like a sweet perfume, mingling with the hope of new beginnings. They stepped out into the sunlight, which seemed to shine just a little brighter, reflecting their optimism. As they made their way to the venue, James and Charlotte chatted animatedly about everything and nothing, their laughter echoing through the streets, creating a bubble of joy around them. Little did they know that their arrival at the wedding would soon become the talk of the event, drawing curious glances and whispered speculations from the guests. The bond they had forged in such a short time would be tested in ways they could never have anticipated, as old wounds and new challenges emerged amidst the celebration. Yet, in that moment, with the world ahead of them, they felt invincible, two souls ready to embrace the possibilities that awaited them, unaware of the twists and turns the day would soon take. As James and Charlotte arrived at the grand venue, they were met with the breathtaking sight of an elegant hall, adorned with intricate floral arrangements and towering centerpieces that seemed to touch the ceiling. Well-dressed guests mingled under the glittering chandeliers, which cast a warm, inviting glow across the room. The soft melodies of a live orchestra played in the background, creating an enchanting atmosphere that felt almost surreal. Each note floated through the air, blending seamlessly with the laughter and chatter of the attendees, making the evening feel like a scene from a fairy tale. The moment the doors swung open, it felt as though time had slowed down. Heads turned, conversations paused, and all eyes suddenly fixated on them, as if the world outside had disappeared. Charlotte's heart raced, but she stood tall beside James, her grip on his arm steady and reassuring. With her newfound poise and stunning dress that flowed elegantly around her, she walked confidently into the hall, leaving behind the insecurities that had once plagued her. She was no longer the woman from the street corner. She was someone who belonged, someone who commanded attention with each graceful step she took. As they made their entrance, whispers began to ripple through the crowd like wildfire, a wave of curiosity igniting as guests exchanged glances and speculations. Conversations faltered and eyes widened, each person eager to understand the unfolding drama before them. Who was this beautiful, mysterious woman whose striking gown and radiant demeanor drew everyone's attention? What had transformed her so dramatically in such a short time? Had she really gone from being a stranger to a stunning vision of elegance in the blink of an eye? And why had James, Isabelle's ex, the one everyone thought was still nursing his heartbreak, chosen to bring her to the wedding? The questions danced in the air, electrifying the atmosphere as the guests leaned in closer, their voices barely above a whisper, straining to catch snippets of conversation and share their own theories. Was this a bold statement of independence from his past, or perhaps a new romance blossoming in the wake of old flames? Speculations darted among the guests like fireflies, each theory more elaborate than the last. Some guests exchanged knowing glances, while others animatedly gestured, drawing others into their discussions. In the corner, a group of women whispered conspiratorially, their eyebrows raised as they speculated about Charlotte's background. Was she a socialite who had fallen from grace, or a hidden gem plucked from obscurity? A few guests, clad in designer attire, eyed her with a mix of envy and admiration, wondering what it must feel like to undergo such a transformation and capture attention so effortlessly. James, sensing the mounting intrigue around them, felt a flush of pride swell in his chest. He couldn't help but glance at Charlotte, who seemed both overwhelmed and exhilarated by the attention. He could see her confidence flickering like a candle, dancing between shyness and the realization of her newfound allure. The crowd's murmurs only added to the intensity of the moment, the atmosphere thick with anticipation and unspoken questions. As they made their way deeper into the hall, navigating through clusters of guests, James felt a surge of protectiveness wash over him, determined to shield Charlotte from any judgment that might lurk behind those curious eyes. It was clear that the evening was not just another wedding. It was the beginning of a narrative that would intertwine their lives in ways neither of them could have predicted. James felt a mix of pride and protectiveness as he noticed the stares and hushed tones that enveloped them like a thick fog. Each glance from the crowd seemed to weigh heavily in the air, charged with curiosity and speculation. He understood the intrigue. Charlotte was nothing short of captivating, a stark contrast to the polished faces and designer outfits that surrounded them. While the other guests exuded an air of effortless sophistication, Charlotte radiated a raw beauty and authenticity that set her apart. He could see her taking it all in, her eyes widening with wonder as she absorbed the elegance of the event and the sumptuous decorations. For the first time, she was enveloped in an atmosphere of luxury, feeling a sense of belonging that had once seemed utterly unattainable. James leaned closer, lowering his voice to a reassuring whisper. "Just be yourself, Charlotte. You are so much more than what they think. You are remarkable, and tonight is about celebrating you just as much as it is about the couple." His words hung between them, each syllable infused with sincerity, as he hoped to ease her nerves and bolster her confidence. He wanted her to realize that she was not merely a curiosity or a subject of gossip, but a woman of depth and strength, deserving of recognition and admiration. As they moved further into the hall, James felt a surge of determination. Together, they were ready to embrace the night and the uncharted territory of their blossoming connection. With each step, he could sense the electric energy of the room, a mixture of laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft strains of music that wove through the air, drawing them deeper into the celebration. Little did they know that this evening would become a pivotal moment in their lives, filled with laughter, unexpected encounters, and challenges that would test the strength of their new bond. With every passing moment, they ventured into a world brimming with possibilities and uncertainties, blissfully unaware of the tumultuous journey that lay ahead, one that would challenge them, change them, and ultimately bring them closer than they ever imagined possible. Isabelle, the bride, stood at the far end of the elegantly decorated room, greeting guests alongside her new husband. The air was filled with laughter and chatter, but when her gaze fell upon James and Charlotte, her smile faltered, replaced by an expression of disbelief that quickly morphed into something darker. The sight of Charlotte, radiant, confident, and entirely unexpected, stirred a tempest of emotions within Isabelle. She felt a pang of jealousy that twisted in her stomach like a knife. It was unsettling to witness how James looked at Charlotte, his eyes sparkling with admiration and warmth, as if she were the only person in the room, and everything else had faded into the background. As James and Charlotte made their way through the crowd, he began introducing her to various guests. Each introduction met with polite but surprised smiles, a mixture of curiosity and intrigue playing across their faces. Charlotte handled herself with remarkable grace and charm, her laughter light and genuine, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was under a microscope. Every interaction felt charged with unspoken questions. Who was this woman? How had she captured James's attention? She sensed the undercurrents of curiosity and judgment swirling around her like a storm, leaving her to navigate the delicate balance between the newfound confidence she felt and the insecurities that lingered just beneath the surface. Despite the compliments and warm greetings, a voice in the back of her mind whispered doubts. Did she truly belong here, in this world of glitz and glamour? Little did they know that this night would not only test the strength of their bond, but also redefine who they were in each other's eyes and the eyes of everyone around them. The stakes felt high, the atmosphere heavy with expectation. As they moved from one conversation to the next, Charlotte could feel the weight of the evening pressing down on her, yet she was determined to hold her head high, to embrace the moment and the possibilities that lay ahead. What she didn't realize was that Isabelle was not just a bride tonight, but a force that would challenge them both, intertwining their fates in ways none of them could have anticipated. Still, Charlotte held her head high, determined to brush off the whispers and glances that followed her and James. The swirling mix of curiosity and judgment felt like daggers aimed at her confidence, but she refused to let their reactions dim her spirit. Just then, Isabelle approached them, her expression a blend of politeness and something harder to define. Perhaps it was the strength of someone grappling with the unexpected. "James, it's good to see you," she said, her eyes flicking to Charlotte as if trying to gauge the situation. "And you must be Charlotte?" "Yes," Charlotte replied, meeting Isabelle's gaze with unwavering calm. "It's a pleasure to meet you. You have a beautiful wedding." Her voice was steady, laced with sincerity, though she could sense the tension in the air thickening. Isabelle forced a smile, but her discomfort was palpable. She clearly hadn't anticipated seeing James with someone so different from the world they once shared, and the mix of jealousy and regret tightened her throat as she surveyed the pair. At that moment, Isabelle had expected James to arrive alone, perhaps appearing forlorn and lost in the crowd, a shadow of the man she once knew. She had imagined him wandering through the elegant hall, his smile faltering as he recalled the memories of their past together. Instead, he stood there, looking happier than she had ever seen him, the light in his eyes illuminating the room in a way that made her heart ache. It stung to witness that joy radiating from him, especially in the company of this woman who seemed to have emerged from nowhere, like a bright star in the night sky. Charlotte's presence was magnetic, drawing attention effortlessly and causing a ripple of intrigue among the guests. As the evening unfolded, the orchestra struck up a slow, romantic tune, filling the room with a melodic warmth that seemed to wrap around them like a comforting embrace. The notes floated through the air, mingling with the laughter and chatter, creating an atmosphere that felt almost ethereal. The couples began to sway gently to the music, lost in their own worlds, but Isabelle's focus remained fixed on James and Charlotte. Every chord struck a painful reminder of what she had lost, of the happiness that now seemed reserved for someone else. The way James leaned toward Charlotte, his laughter mingling with the melody, only heightened her sense of isolation in a room full of celebration. The exquisite decorations, from the glimmering chandeliers to the delicate floral arrangements, faded into the background as her gaze remained locked on them. She could see the way Charlotte leaned in closer, her smile radiant, as if she were sharing a secret that the rest of the world was not privy to. Isabelle clenched her fists, feeling an unsettling mix of jealousy and sadness wash over her. The music seemed to swell around her, a poignant reminder that life was moving forward, and she was still grappling with the past. In that moment, she knew that this night would challenge her not only as a newlywed, but also as someone who had once been at the center of James's universe. It was a bittersweet realization that the night was not just a celebration of love, but also a painful reckoning of what had changed forever. "May I have this dance?" James asked, turning to Charlotte with an inviting smile. She hesitated for a heartbeat, the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders, but the warmth in his eyes melted away her uncertainty, and she nodded. He led her to the dance floor, and as they began to sway together, Charlotte felt herself relax. The music, the elegance of the room, and the gentle motion of the dance made everything else fade into the background. However, Isabelle stood off to the side, her heart sinking as she observed the effortless chemistry between James and Charlotte. It was as if they were in their own world, completely absorbed in one another, with laughter and glances exchanged that felt intimate and electric. The sharp pang of jealousy clawed at her insides, an unwelcome sensation that twisted like a knife, mingling with the regret that simmered just beneath the surface. Watching them, Isabelle couldn't help but question her own choices, wondering if she had made a grave mistake by letting him go. Memories flooded her mind, vivid and haunting. She recalled the moments they had shared, the late-night talks filled with dreams, the gentle way he used to brush a strand of hair behind her ear, the laughter that had once echoed in the corners of their lives. Each recollection only deepened her sense of loss, making her acutely aware of the warmth that had been replaced by a cold emptiness. She tried to shake off the thoughts, but they clung to her like shadows, refusing to be ignored. As she stood there, frozen in a sea of well-dressed guests twirling around her, she felt an overwhelming sense of isolation. The vibrant colors of the wedding, the music that danced through the air, and the joy radiating from couples around her faded into a dull blur, leaving her with a profound sense of longing. Isabelle's eyes flickered back to James, who was now leaning in closer to Charlotte, his smile wide and genuine. The sight twisted in her gut. She felt as if she were watching a life she could have had slipping away. The weight of her decision settled heavily on her chest, and she couldn't shake the thought that perhaps she had been too quick to walk away from something that could have been extraordinary. Was it really worth it, this new life she had chosen, if it meant watching the man she loved find happiness with someone else? As the laughter and music swirled around her, Isabelle felt a solitary tear escape down her cheek, a silent testament to the turmoil brewing within her heart. Would she always be the one standing on the sidelines, watching the joy of others, while grappling with her own unfulfilled dreams? For James, the dance was a revelation, a moment suspended in time that felt both surreal and electrifying. As he held Charlotte close, her warmth radiating against him, he realized that what had begun as an impulsive decision to bring her to the wedding had blossomed into something far more meaningful and profound. In that intimate space, with the music enveloping them like a gentle embrace, he understood that Charlotte wasn't just a beautiful distraction from his past. She was someone he genuinely cared about, someone who ignited a spark within him that he thought had long been extinguished. Every sway of their bodies seemed to harmonize with the soft melody, creating a rhythm that resonated deeply within his heart. James found himself captivated by Charlotte's eyes, which shone with a mix of excitement and vulnerability, revealing layers of emotion that mirrored his own. As they danced, he felt the weight of the world melt away. The chatter of the wedding guests faded into the background, replaced by the soothing sound of their laughter and the subtle beating of his heart. The emotions swirling within him during that dance were new and unexpected, awakening feelings he thought he had buried beneath the rubble of his breakup with Isabelle. For too long, he had walked through life with a heavy heart, weighed down by guilt and regret. But now, as he gazed into Charlotte's eyes, he found himself stepping into a brighter chapter, filled with hope and possibility. She brought a freshness to his soul, a reminder of what it felt like to connect deeply with another person. For the first time in what felt like forever, James experienced a sense of peace and happiness that was both exhilarating and terrifying. The gentle rise and fall of their bodies mirrored the way his heart raced with each passing second, each twirl and dip drawing them closer together. In that moment, surrounded by the elegance of the wedding and the warmth of Charlotte's presence, James felt a surge of optimism that he had thought was lost to him forever. This was not just a fleeting moment. It was the beginning of a new journey, one filled with uncharted territory, unexpected joys, and the thrilling uncertainty of love blossoming anew. He had dared to step outside his comfort zone, and in doing so, he had discovered not only Charlotte, but also a part of himself that he thought had been lost. As the song drew to a close, James gazed into Charlotte's eyes and understood that this night, and their journey together, was just beginning. In that shared moment, a profound connection crystallized between them, a silent acknowledgement that something beautiful was unfolding. What had started as a simple act of defiance, an escape from the burdens of their pasts, was evolving into something deeper, something real and authentic. They both sensed that this was only the first chapter of a story neither had anticipated, a narrative filled with potential and the promise of new experiences. As the evening wore on, The atmosphere in the grand hall shifted, the tension in the room becoming almost palpable. Laughter echoed around them, yet there was an underlying current of unease, particularly surrounding Isabelle. She had been trying to maintain her composure, forcing a smile and engaging with guests, but her focus kept drifting back to James and Charlotte. Each stolen glance in their direction reignited the tumultuous emotions she had tried to bury: regret, jealousy, and a lingering sense of loss. The sight of them together, James leaning in, laughing easily with Charlotte, their chemistry unmistakable, was a painful reminder of what she had let slip away. The weight of it all became too much to bear, pressing heavily against her chest like a stone. Isabelle could no longer pretend everything was fine. The carefully constructed facade she had maintained began to crumble, piece by piece, as she battled the swirling feelings of inadequacy and sorrow. She fought against the urge to flee, knowing that doing so would only amplify her sense of failure. Instead, she clung to her glass, the ice clinking inside as her grip tightened, a distraction from the emotional storm brewing within her. With every smile shared between James and Charlotte, Isabelle felt a sharp pang of realization. She had taken his love for granted, and now he was finding joy and companionship in the arms of another. She wondered if it was too late to reclaim what they had, to reignite the spark that once burned so brightly between them. As the orchestra played another lively tune, Isabelle forced herself to breathe, trying to quell the chaos in her heart. Yet, no matter how much she tried to concentrate on the joyful atmosphere around her, the truth remained. She could no longer ignore the reality that her heart still belonged to James, and watching him with Charlotte was more than she could bear. In a moment of desperation, Isabelle caught James alone near the garden entrance, the air outside heavy with the fragrant scent of blooming flowers, a stark contrast to the tension that gripped her heart. The distant sounds of laughter and clinking glasses from the bustling reception hall faded into a dull murmur as she stepped closer to him. "James," she began, her voice tight with emotion. "Can we talk for a moment?" James sensed the discomfort in her tone and nodded, his brows furrowing with concern as he studied her face, which was a mixture of determination and uncertainty. "Of course, Isabelle. What's on your mind?" His words were gentle, but a hint of wariness lingered in the air between them, as if both were acutely aware that this conversation could shift the dynamics of their relationship. Isabelle hesitated, searching for the right words, her anxiety twisting in her gut like a knotted vine. She felt vulnerable standing there, the weight of unspoken feelings pressing down on her chest. I didn't expect you to bring someone like Charlotte to the wedding. I mean, it's obvious she's not from our usual circle. I'm concerned about how people might perceive this." Her voice wavered slightly, revealing the underlying fear of judgment that haunted her. She glanced back toward the reception hall, where laughter bubbled and guests swirled about, blissfully unaware of the turmoil brewing just outside. James frowned, taken aback by her words. "Isabelle, Charlotte is a wonderful person. She may not come from wealth, but that doesn't define her worth. Why does it matter what others think?" His brow furrowed deeper as he processed her concerns, feeling a rush of protectiveness for Charlotte. He had witnessed her strength and resilience in the brief time they had spent together, and he couldn't understand why Isabelle couldn't see that. To him, Charlotte was not a curiosity or a symbol of his defiance, but an individual with a rich inner life and a warmth that captivated him. The moonlight cast a soft glow around them, and Isabelle's heart raced as she struggled to articulate her feelings. "It's not just about her, James. It's about how this looks. We're at a wedding, a celebration of love, and I can't help but feel that it sends a confusing message. People will talk. They always do." Her voice dropped to a whisper, vulnerability spilling out. "I still care about you, and seeing you with her, it's difficult. I'm trying to understand how this happened." James felt a flicker of frustration ignite within him. "You mean to tell me that the opinions of others dictate your feelings about our choices? Charlotte is here because I chose to bring her, not because I wanted to provoke you or anyone else." He took a step closer, his voice softening but still firm. "I didn't want to come alone, and she offered me a chance to enjoy the evening. I thought you'd be happy for me." Isabelle's gaze fell, her mind racing as she grappled with her conflicting emotions. The ground beneath her felt unstable, and she realized that what she feared most was not the whispers of the guests, but the reality of losing James altogether. As she looked back up at him, a wave of vulnerability washed over her, and she felt the truth of her feelings rush to the surface. "I just don't want to lose you, James, and I guess I'm afraid that she might be someone you could genuinely connect with, someone who could take my place in your life." Her honesty hung heavy in the air, and for a moment, they both stood silent, absorbing the weight of her confession. In that fragile moment of honesty, both James and Isabelle were confronted with the possibility of change, the need for clarity amidst the swirling emotions that surrounded them. As he spoke, Isabelle's mask of concern began to slip, revealing the jealousy simmering just beneath the surface. "I just don't want you to get hurt, James. You've been through so much already, and I don't think—" Her voice trailed off, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her features as she struggled to articulate her feelings without sounding possessive or bitter. The truth was, seeing him with Charlotte ignited something inside her, a primal fear of losing him, compounded by the undeniable chemistry she had once shared with him. The mere thought of him moving on with someone else, especially someone as captivating as Charlotte, twisted her stomach in knots. Before she could finish, Charlotte approached, having overheard enough of the conversation to understand its nature. The air grew thick with unspoken tension as Charlotte felt the weight of both women's emotions pressing in on her. She was acutely aware of how their dynamic shifted the moment she arrived at the wedding. The lingering glances, the hushed whispers. It all added up to a charged atmosphere that made her heart race. Yet, Charlotte stepped forward anyway, determined to confront the situation head-on. She had no intention of allowing insecurity to dictate the narrative of her burgeoning relationship with James, nor was she going to let Isabelle's apprehensions overshadow the joy she had found in their connection. With a steadying breath, Charlotte approached the pair, her posture confident and her expression resolute. "Is everything all right here?" she asked, her voice calm but firm, breaking the charged silence that had enveloped them. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she refused to let fear dictate her actions. She could sense the unspoken history between them, the lingering feelings and unresolved tension, and it ignited a protective instinct within her. Charlotte was not one to shy away from confrontation, especially when it came to defending what she felt was right. James glanced at Charlotte, relief washing over him at her arrival, while Isabelle's expression shifted to one of annoyance, a flicker of indignation crossing her features. "We were just discussing your unexpected presence here," Isabelle replied, her tone laced with a hint of defensiveness, unwilling to let go of her claim on James, even if it was only in her mind. Charlotte met Isabelle's gaze with unwavering determination, refusing to back down. "I understand this is a surprise for you, but I'm here with James because we both chose to be. We're just getting to know each other," she said, her voice steady, a warm but firm tone that indicated she wouldn't be intimidated. "I appreciate your concern, but James is not a fragile object to be protected. He's capable of making his own choices." The tension between the three of them crackled like static electricity in the air, each person brimming with emotions that had been held back for too long. Charlotte's heart raced as she stood her ground, aware that this confrontation could very well redefine the relationships before her. In this moment, she was no longer just a woman who had stumbled into an unexpected role at a wedding. She was asserting herself, carving out a space where her feelings mattered, where she belonged. James watched the interaction unfold, a mix of admiration and concern swirling within him. He appreciated Charlotte's boldness, but felt the need to intervene. "Isabelle, this isn't about what you think might happen or how you feel. It's about how I feel, about how we feel," he said, his voice steady and authoritative, signaling that he would no longer allow the past to dictate his present. "Charlotte deserves the chance to be here without judgment, just as much as you do." As the tension hung in the air, Charlotte felt a sense of resolve solidify within her. She refused to let jealousy or fear of inadequacy overshadow the genuine connection she shared with James. She had fought too hard to get to this point, to let it slip away over something as volatile as insecurity. In that moment, the stakes were clear. This was not just a passing fancy. It was the start of something potentially profound, and she was ready to embrace it. She stepped forward, her expression calm yet resolute. "Excuse me, Isabelle," Charlotte began softly, her voice steady and clear. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. I know I'm not what you expected, and that's perfectly okay. But James invited me here because he saw something in me that others often overlook. We've all made mistakes, and we've all needed second chances at some point in our lives. I'm here tonight not just for James, but for myself, to remind myself that I'm more than my circumstances." Isabelle stood frozen for a moment, momentarily speechless, caught off guard by Charlotte's directness and the quiet strength behind her words. She had anticipated Charlotte would shy away, intimidated by the elegant surroundings and the scrutinizing eyes of the guests. Instead, Charlotte stood firm, her gaze unwavering, a stark contrast to the delicate atmosphere of the wedding. James watched Charlotte with a swell of respect and affection, realizing in that instant that she was far more than just a companion for the evening. She had faced life's challenges with grace and resilience, standing up for herself and for others in a way that was inspiring. In that moment, James understood that his feelings for Charlotte had evolved into something profound, something that transcended the impulsive decision that had brought them together in the first place. The exchange didn't go unnoticed. Nearby guests who had been discreetly observing suddenly saw Charlotte in a new light. The whispers that had once been laced with judgment transformed into murmurs of admiration. Charlotte's poise and dignity in the face of such a confrontation left a lasting impression on everyone present, weaving a sense of respect around her like a shimmering veil. Isabelle, flustered and unsure of herself for the first time that night, mumbled something about needing to get back to her guests. She quickly excused herself, leaving James and Charlotte standing together in the quiet of the garden, where the sound of laughter and music faded into a gentle hum. "Thank you," James said, turning to Charlotte, his expression softening. "You didn't have to do that." Charlotte smiled gently, her eyes bright with sincerity. "I know what you've given me tonight, James. The least I could do was stand by you." At that moment, James felt a shift within him. He no longer cared about impressing Isabelle or anyone else at the wedding. His focus had entirely shifted to Charlotte, the woman who had not only stood by his side, but had done so with strength and grace humbled him. The evening had taken an unexpected turn, and for James, it was clear that this night was no longer about the past. It was about the future and the possibilities that lay ahead with Charlotte. As the night began to wind down, Isabelle found James alone near the edge of the damp grass, watching the remaining guests mingle under the twinkling lights. She approached him, her steps hesitant yet determined, a sense of urgency in her eyes that James hadn't seen before. "James, can we talk for a moment?" Isabelle asked softly, her voice trembling just slightly, revealing an unexpected vulnerability that tugged at his heart. "Of course, Isabelle. What's on your mind?" James replied, turning to face her, his expression open and inviting. Isabelle took a deep breath, gathering the courage to express the thoughts that had been weighing heavily on her all night. "I've been thinking, ever since I saw you with Charlotte tonight. I realized something. I made a mistake when I left you. I thought you were too focused on your work, that you didn't have time for me. But seeing you tonight, seeing how you've changed, I regret ending things with you." James was taken aback by her confession. He had never expected Isabelle to admit any regrets, especially not tonight. But as she spoke, a sense of calm washed over him. He listened intently, yet something inside him had shifted. The feelings he once had for Isabelle, the pain of their breakup, all seemed to dissolve into something lighter, easier to let go of. "Isabelle," he began gently, "I appreciate your honesty. But the truth is, I've moved on. Our relationship was important to me, but it's in the past now. What we had was real, but it's over." His words hung in the air like a bittersweet melody, echoing the changes both of them had undergone. James knew he had to embrace the future, and in that moment, he felt a flicker of hope. The night was filled with unexpected possibilities, and perhaps, just perhaps, a new chapter was waiting for him and Charlotte, one that held the promise of joy and discovery beyond what he had ever imagined. "I found peace with that," James replied, his tone steady, yet infused with a softness that surprised even him. Isabelle's eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and understanding as she absorbed his words. She hadn't anticipated James to be so clear, so resolute in his decision. "I see," she murmured, her voice barely audible, heavy with regret. "I'm sorry for how things ended, James. I wish you all the best." James nodded, offering her a small, genuine smile that seemed to bridge the gap of their shared past. "Thank you, Isabelle. I wish you happiness too." As Isabelle walked away, a sense of liberation washed over him. It was as though he had finally closed the chapter on that part of his life, and it felt good, like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He had always thought that seeing Isabelle again, especially at her wedding, would be painful, but instead, it had brought him clarity and closure. Unbeknownst to them, Charlotte had overheard their conversation. She had been passing by, heading toward the garden for a moment of quiet reflection, when she caught snippets of Claire's confession and James's composed response. She paused, her heart a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. While she felt a surge of relief that James had moved on from Isabelle, a nagging doubt crept in. Was she merely a tool for James to prove a point? Was she just a stepping stone in his journey to get over his past? Seeking solace, Charlotte walked into the garden, finding a secluded bench where she could sit and gather her thoughts. The cool night air enveloped her, and as she sat, she felt the weight of everything that had transpired that night pressing down on her. She realized she had grown fond of James, perhaps even more than fond. Her feelings were deeper than she had initially allowed herself to admit. Yet, doubts began to creep in like shadows. Did he truly see her for who she was, or was she simply a symbol of his newfound freedom from Isabelle? As the stars twinkled above, illuminating the dark sky, Charlotte knew she had to confront these questions head-on. She couldn't allow herself to be just a passing chapter in someone else's story. If she was going to move forward with James, she needed assurance that he saw her as a person worthy of love and admiration, not just as a reaction to his tumultuous past with Isabelle. The evening was drawing to a close, but the uncertainty lingering in her mind signaled that the night was far from over. She had to talk to James to uncover his true intentions, and she hoped that the answers would provide her with the clarity she so desperately sought. Gathering her courage, Charlotte found James standing alone near the garden, the cool night air offering a brief reprieve from the evening's intensity. He looked lost in thought, and she could see the remnants of emotion etched across his face. Steeling herself, Charlotte approached him, knowing that this moment could define their future. "James," she began softly, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "I need to ask you something." James turned to face her, noticing the seriousness in her eyes. "Of course, Charlotte. What's on your mind?" Taking a deep breath, Charlotte continued, her heart pounding in her chest. "Was I just a pawn in your plan tonight? Was this all about making Isabelle jealous? Because if it was, I need to know. I won't be just a tool for someone else's closure." James's heart sank as he realized how his actions might have been interpreted. He had been so caught up in the emotions of the evening, so focused on confronting his past, that he hadn't considered how Charlotte might be feeling. He stepped closer to her, his expression softening, genuine concern filling his eyes. "Charlotte," he said earnestly, "I'm sorry if I made you feel that way. That was never my intention. When I first invited you, I'll admit I was reacting to my own feelings, maybe even a bit of pride, but what I didn't expect was how much I've come to admire and care for you." Charlotte looked up at him, searching his eyes for any sign of insincerity, any flicker of doubt. "So this isn't just about proving something to Isabelle?" James shook his head, his voice filled with conviction. "No, it's not. You mean more to me than that. I've realized that my feelings for you are real, and I want to explore where this connection could lead." His words hung in the air, the weight of his honesty resonating between them. Charlotte felt a rush of relief, mingled with hope. Perhaps this was the beginning of something beautiful, something untainted by the past, a journey they could embark on together, hand in hand, leaving the shadows behind. "No, Isabelle is my past, and I've made peace with that tonight," James said, his voice steady, each word deliberate. "But you You've shown me something I didn't know I was missing. Your strength, your kindness, the way you've handled everything tonight. It's made me see things differently. I'm not thinking about Isabelle anymore. I'm thinking about you and how much I want to know you better, beyond tonight." A wave of relief washed over Charlotte, mingling with the swell of emotion in her heart. James's words struck a chord deep within her, and she could sense the sincerity in his voice. For the first time that evening, she allowed herself to believe that this connection could be real, that she could be more than just a fleeting moment in his life. "Thank you for being honest with me," Charlotte replied, her voice softening. "I care about you too, James, but I needed to know that this wasn't just a one-time thing." James reached out, gently taking her hand in his, grounding her in the moment. "It's not," he assured her, his eyes sincere and unwavering. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to spend more time with you. I want to see where this can go." In that moment, a deep bond began to form between them, blossoming into something more meaningful than either had anticipated. It was a connection rooted not in the shadows of their pasts, but in the hopeful possibilities of their future. As they turned to look back at the wedding reception, where guests continued to chatter and dance, James felt a sudden urge to escape the superficiality that surrounded them. He glanced at Charlotte and saw that she was contemplating the same thing. "Why don't we get out of here?" he suggested with a warm smile. "Let's spend the rest of the evening somewhere else, just the two of us." Charlotte smiled back, feeling a warmth in her heart that she hadn't felt in a long time. "I'd like that," she replied. Together they quietly slipped away from the wedding, leaving behind the judgmental eyes and whispered gossip that had been a backdrop to their earlier conversations. They stepped into the night, ready to explore whatever the future might hold on their own terms. As James and Charlotte walked away from the wedding venue, the noise and chatter of the event faded into the background, replaced by the intimacy of their budding connection. The night air was cool against their skin, and the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter as they strolled hand in hand. For the first time in ages, James felt a sense of peace and optimism about the future, an emotion that had eluded him for far too long. "Charlotte," he said, turning to her with newfound resolve in his eyes, "I don't just want tonight to be a one-time thing. I want to help you, support you, and see where this goes. You have so much potential, and I want to be there for you as you pursue your dreams." Charlotte looked up at him, her heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and excitement. "Thank you, James. You don't know what this means to me. For the first time in years, I feel like I have a real chance to turn my life around and to do it with someone who believes in me. That's more than I ever hoped for." As they continued their walk, the bustling sounds of the wedding reception faded into the background, creating a cocoon of intimacy around them. The air was filled with a gentle breeze, rustling the leaves of nearby trees and carrying the sweet scent of blooming flowers. Their conversation shifted to Charlotte's aspirations, dreams that had long been buried under the weight of her struggles and the harsh realities she had faced. James, with his genuine interest, asked probing questions that drew out her hopes and ambitions, and for the first time in years, Charlotte found herself opening up about her deepest desires. "I've always wanted to start my own business," Charlotte confessed, her voice barely above a whisper, as if sharing a secret she had kept for too long. "Ever since I was a kid, I dreamed of creating something meaningful, something that could make a difference." The memories flowed through her like a refreshing stream, and with each word, she painted a picture of her visions, a small boutique filled with handmade crafts that celebrated local artists, a cozy cafe where people could gather, share stories, and find solace in each other's company. James listened intently, his eyes bright with encouragement, as he offered ideas on how they could work together to make those dreams a reality. "You know, I have some contacts in the business community who might be able to help you get started," he suggested enthusiastically. "We could brainstorm a plan, maybe even look into some grants or funding options." His enthusiasm was infectious, igniting a spark within Charlotte that had long been dormant. With each step they took, Charlotte felt empowered, her confidence growing in the light of James's unwavering support. She could hardly believe how far she had come, from a place of uncertainty to standing at the cusp of possibility. As they strolled down the tree-lined path, she envisioned herself surrounded by the vibrant colors of her dreams, her heart swelling with hope and determination. "You really think I can do this?" she asked, a hint of disbelief lacing her tone. "Absolutely," James replied, a reassuring smile lighting up his face. "You have the passion, the creativity, and now you have the drive. Don't underestimate your potential, Charlotte. This is your time to shine." His words resonated deep within her, stirring a mix of gratitude and excitement. Charlotte couldn't help but smile back, feeling a warmth spreading through her chest as she realized that this moment was about more than just dreams. It was about forging a partnership grounded in mutual respect and encouragement. They were embarking on a journey together, one where they could explore not just their individual aspirations, but also the possibility of building a future side by side. With every word exchanged, she felt the weight of her past lifting, replaced by a newfound clarity that came with envisioning her dreams coming to life. As they continued walking, Charlotte shared more details about her ideas, the colors she imagined for her future boutique, the scents she wanted to fill her cafe, and the community she envisioned creating. James absorbed every detail, nodding in agreement, and occasionally interjecting with suggestions that made her ideas bloom even further. "What if you held local art fairs or workshops to bring people together?" he proposed, his eyes alight with enthusiasm. The discussion flowed effortlessly, weaving in and out of inspiration and practical steps, and Charlotte felt a rush of adrenaline course through her. For the first time, she realized that her dreams were not just figments of her imagination, they could actually become tangible realities. As they neared the end of their walk, Charlotte looked at James with a grateful heart, understanding that this journey was just beginning. With his support, she felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, emboldened by the knowledge that she would no longer be alone in her quest to turn her dreams into reality. Meanwhile, back at the wedding, Isabelle watched them from a distance, her heart heavy with a profound sense of loss. The sight of James and Charlotte disappearing into the night filled her with regret. She had always thought she would hold the upper hand, that James's feelings for her would never fully fade. But now, as she witnessed his genuine happiness with someone else, she realized how wrong she had been. The pain of regret washed over her as she understood that she had let go of something genuine and meaningful, a love she had taken for granted. As James and Charlotte reached the end of the path leading away from the wedding venue, they paused for a moment, looking out at the twinkling city lights in the distance. The air was thick with a sense of finality, not of an ending, but of a new beginning. "This feels like the start of something good," Charlotte said softly, squeezing James's hand. "It does," James agreed, a smile spreading across his face, "and I can't wait to see where it takes us." Their story unfolded as they walked together into the night, ready to face whatever challenges and opportunities the future might bring. Their pasts no longer defined them. Instead, they were united by a shared hope and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. The journey ahead was filled with love, growth, and endless possibilities, and they were both eager to embrace it together. The sun was just beginning to rise over Maplewood, casting a warm glow over the quaint town. It was a Saturday morning, and the streets were slowly coming to life as locals opened their shops and families prepared for the weekend. In the heart of the town stood a small auto repair shop, Marcus's Garage, known for its skilled mechanics and fair prices. It was a place where cars got fixed and friendships were forged. Inside the garage, Marcus Johnson, a talented black mechanic with over a decade of experience, wiped his hands on a rag and surveyed the cluttered workspace. His shop was filled with the familiar sounds of tools clanking and engines humming, accompanied by the scent of motor oil and freshly cut grass from the nearby park. Marcus loved his job and took great pride in his work. He was respected not just for his mechanical skills, but also for his integrity and the trust he built within the community. However, today would be different. Today, the harmony of his work environment would be shattered by an unexpected accusation that would turn his life upside down. Marcus had always been the kind of person who could fix just about anything. His passion for cars began at an early age when he would spend weekends with his grandfather, a master mechanic who taught him the ins and outs of auto repair. Marcus carried those lessons with him, and as he grew, so did his reputation as a dependable mechanic. On the other side of the equation stood Mr. Johnson, a well-to-do white man in his 50s, known in the community for his arrogant demeanor. He was a businessman who owned several local franchises, and his entitlement often rubbed people the wrong way. Mr. Johnson had little patience for those he deemed beneath him, which often included service workers and anyone outside his social circle. This particular Saturday, Mr. Johnson arrived at Marcus's garage in a brand new luxury SUV, a vehicle he flaunted as a symbol of his success. He pulled up, adjusting his expensive sunglasses, and stepped out with an air of superiority. Little did Marcus know, Mr. Johnson's visit would unleash a storm of drama that would test his character and resolve. After a brief greeting, Mr. Johnson handed Marcus the keys to his SUV. "I need a full inspection, Marcus," he said, his voice dripping with authority. "And make sure you take care of it. I don't want anything messed up." Marcus nodded, keeping his cool. "Of course, Mr. Johnson. I'll make sure everything is in top shape." Hours later, after completing the inspection, Marcus called Mr. Johnson to inform him that the SUV was ready for pickup. But when Mr. Johnson arrived, he wore a scowl that immediately raised Marcus's concern. "Is there a problem?" Marcus asked, noticing the tension in the air. "That's what I'd like to know," Mr. Johnson snapped, pointing at his vehicle. "What did you do to my car? It was perfect when I brought it in, and now it's damaged." Marcus was taken aback. "Damaged? I just inspected it. Are you sure it wasn't like this before?" "Don't give me that. You think you can just play around with my car and get away with it? You better fix this." Mr. Johnson's voice rose, drawing the attention of other customers in the garage. Marcus felt his stomach drop. This was completely out of character for him. He prided himself on his honesty and workmanship. "Let's take a look at it together," he suggested, trying to keep the situation calm. As they approached the vehicle, Marcus noticed a scratch on the rear bumper that Mr. Johnson had apparently not mentioned before. "This wasn't here when you brought it in," Marcus pointed out. "I didn't even work on the back of the car." "I don't care. You're responsible for this," Mr. Johnson continued, his face reddening with anger. "I'll be reporting this to the owner. I expect to be compensated." Feeling the weight of the accusation, Marcus's heart raced. He could sense the other customers watching, their eyes flickering between him and Mr. Johnson, trying to gauge the unfolding drama. The humiliation hung heavy in the air. "Let's get this sorted out, sir. I'll pull the footage from our security cameras," Marcus offered, desperate to prove his innocence. Mr. Johnson scoffed. "You think a video will save you? It's clear you can't be trusted." The tension escalated as Marcus nodded, determination fueling him. "I'll get the footage, and we'll clear this up," he insisted. He rushed to the back office, heart pounding, knowing that proving himself right was not just about his reputation, but also about standing against the prejudice he had faced his entire life. In the dim light of his office, Marcus pulled up the security footage from earlier that day. The video displayed his shop from various angles, providing a view of every car that entered and exited. As he scrubbed through the footage, he found the moment Mr. Johnson arrived. Watching closely, Marcus felt a mix of anxiety and hope. He needed this evidence. He couldn't let this false accusation ruin him. Then, there it was, a clear view of Mr. Johnson driving in, parking carelessly, and then getting out of his vehicle. As Marcus continued to watch, his heart sank. The footage revealed Mr. Johnson knocking into a trash can while backing out, a loud thud echoing through the audio feed. After that, Mr. Johnson's SUV was parked for a while before he came back in, completely unaware of the small scratch that had already been present. The realization hit Marcus like a freight train. Mr. Johnson had damaged his own vehicle and was trying to blame Marcus to cover his tracks. He felt a mix of anger and relief. Anger at the injustice and relief that he had proof to defend himself. Armed with the video evidence, Marcus gathered his courage and returned to the front of the shop, where Mr. Johnson was still pacing angrily. The sight of him stirred Marcus's determination. "Mr. Johnson, I have the footage," Marcus declared, his voice steady. "I think you should take a look." As Marcus played the video for Mr. Johnson, the tension in the air thickened. The customers who had gathered leaned in, intrigued by the unfolding drama. Marcus's heart raced as he pressed play. The footage showed Mr. Johnson arriving, parking his vehicle, and, crucially, the moment he struck the trash can while backing out. Gasps echoed from the small crowd as they watched the evidence unfold. Marcus felt a wave of validation wash over him, the truth finally coming to light. Once the video concluded, the silence was palpable. Mr. Johnson's face turned from red to pale, disbelief etched across his features. This isn't possible," he stammered, trying to gather his composure. "You're trying to frame me." The crowd erupted in murmurs, disbelief turning to anger directed toward Mr. Johnson. "You can't just blame someone else for your mistake," one bystander shouted. Another chimed in, "You should be ashamed of yourself." "Is this how you treat a hard-working man?" someone else added, their voice filled with indignation. Marcus stood tall, fueled by the support of the community. "This is about respect. I work hard for my reputation, and I will not let anyone destroy that with baseless accusations." Seeing the tide of support shift, Mr. Johnson's bravado faltered. He was used to being the one in control, the one calling the shots. But today, the tables had turned. The voices of the community rang louder than his own. Faced with the evidence and the crowd's judgment, Mr. Johnson's demeanor changed. The arrogance he had exuded moments ago melted away, replaced by a desperate need to salvage his reputation. Okay, I was wrong," he muttered, his voice barely audible, "but I'll fix this." "Fix it?" Marcus replied, his voice firm. "You can start by apologizing to me and everyone here for your behavior." Mr. Johnson took a deep breath, looking around at the faces that had once regarded him with respect. "I apologize, Marcus. I let my anger get the better of me. I should have handled this differently." The community members exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and amusement. It was rare to see Mr. Johnson humbled, and the sight brought a sense of justice that lingered in the air. With a nod, Marcus accepted the apology. "Let's move forward from this, but I hope you learn from this experience. We're all in this community together, and we need to lift each other up, not tear each other down." As Mr. Johnson left the garage, his pride bruised, but perhaps a little wiser, Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had stood up for himself, and the community had rallied behind him. The incident had revealed not only Mr. Johnson's shortcomings, but also the strength of the support that surrounded Marcus. Over the next few weeks, business at Marcus's garage boomed. Loyal customers flooded in, eager to support the mechanic who had stood up against unfair treatment. Word spread about what had happened, and the small-town mechanic became a local hero, a symbol of resilience and integrity. One afternoon, as Marcus worked on a vintage Mustang, he noticed a familiar face at the door. It was one of the community members who had supported him during the confrontation. "Hey, Marcus, we're organizing a community event to celebrate local businesses and show our support for you. We want you to be the guest of honor." Marcus looked up, surprised but pleased. "You really don't have to do that," he replied, wiping his hands on a rag and stepping out from behind the car. "I'm just doing my job." "But that's exactly why we want to celebrate you," the community member insisted. "You stood up for what's right, and that inspires us all. It's about time someone showed that integrity matters in this town." As the weeks rolled on, the preparations for the event continued. Marcus found himself humbled by the outpouring of support. Local businesses donated food, drinks, and prizes for a raffle, and word spread quickly, turning what began as a small gathering into a town-wide celebration. Finally, the day of the event arrived. The town square was transformed into a lively gathering space, complete with tents, tables, and colorful decorations. Families filled the area, children played games, and the smell of delicious food wafted through the air. A local band set up on a makeshift stage, ready to play throughout the day. As Marcus arrived, he was met with cheers and applause. The townsfolk had put up a banner that read, "Celebrating integrity and community. Thank you, Marcus." The sight brought a lump to his throat. He felt overwhelmed, realizing that the incident with Mr. Johnson had not only highlighted the importance of standing up against prejudice, but also strengthened the bonds within the community. "Marcus, come on up," the organizer called out, waving him toward the stage. "We want to give you a little something." As he stepped up, a hush fell over the crowd. The organizer began to speak. "Today, we celebrate a man who stood firm in the face of injustice. Marcus, Your commitment to your work and the way you handled that situation with Mr. Johnson has inspired us all. We want to show our appreciation for not just your skills as a mechanic, but your integrity as a person." The crowd erupted in applause as the organizer handed Marcus a framed certificate that read, "Maplewood's Integrity Award." Marcus felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. He knew that this award was not just a personal achievement, but a recognition of the values he believed in. "Thank you all so much," Marcus said, his voice shaky with emotion. "I didn't expect any of this. I just do my job the best I can. But to see all of you here supporting me means the world. We're all part of this community, and together we can lift each other up. Thank you." The cheers that followed echoed through the square, a testament to the strength of the community spirit. As the day wore on, the celebrations continued with food, laughter, and games. Families mingled and friendships blossomed. Marcus took the opportunity to chat with customers and friends, sharing stories and laughter. He felt a renewed sense of purpose and belonging. Mr. Johnson, who had initially been too proud to show his face at the event, was spotted later in the afternoon. He stood awkwardly on the edge of the crowd, watching the festivities. Taking a deep breath, he approached Marcus, who was surrounded by well-wishers. "Hey, Marcus," he said, his tone subdued. "I just wanted to apologize again for everything. I was wrong, and I appreciate how you handled it. I know I've been hard on you and others in the past, and I'm trying to change that." Marcus studied him for a moment. "I appreciate that, Mr. Johnson. It takes a lot to admit when you're wrong. I hope this experience helps you see things differently." Mr. Johnson nodded, a look of genuine contrition on his face. "I've realized that everyone deserves respect, no matter who they are. I want to support local businesses, starting with yours." They shook hands, a gesture that signified a newfound understanding. The crowd around them noticed the interaction and murmured their approval, embracing the idea of forgiveness and growth. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the town, Marcus stood back and took in the scene. Children ran around with ice cream, couples danced to the music, and laughter filled the air. He felt a sense of fulfillment wash over him. In that moment, he realized that the ordeal with Mr. Johnson had been more than just a battle for his reputation. It had been a catalyst for change. It had opened dialogues about respect, integrity, and community support. It had shown him the power of standing up against prejudice and how one person's actions could inspire many. Later that evening, as the band played their final song and the crowd began to disperse, Marcus packed up his things with a sense of hope. He knew that the road ahead would not be without challenges, but he felt ready to face them head-on, armed with the support of his community. As he drove home, he reflected on how far he had come. He thought about his grandfather, who had instilled in him the importance of hard work and integrity. He hoped he was making him proud. Marcus parked his car in front of his modest home and looked around, taking in the tranquility of the evening. With a smile on his face, he thought about the future, his shop, his community, and the bonds he had strengthened. He was more than just a mechanic. He was a pillar of the community, and he was determined to continue making a positive impact, one car at a time. As he walked inside, he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey he had undertaken and the lessons learned. He was ready to embrace whatever came next, confident that he was never alone in this fight for justice and respect. Together with his community, he would forge a path forward, strong and united. Jasmine had always loved the smell of coffee, the rich aroma of freshly ground beans, and the soft hum of chatter around the cafe always felt like a small slice of peace amidst the chaos of life. For as long as she could remember, she had been drawn to the warmth and comfort of coffee shops. So when she started working at Bean and Bliss, the upscale coffee shop in the heart of downtown, she knew it was a perfect fit for her, at least for now. What no one knew was that this job, this role as a barista, was far from the limit of Jasmine's life. "Grande caramel macchiato, extra shot, no foam," she called out with a smile, setting the steaming cup on the counter. "Thank you, Jasmine." A regular customer smiled back as he grabbed his drink. Everyone liked Jasmine. She was quick, efficient, always kind, and most importantly, she knew how to handle the sometimes overwhelming crowds that filtered in and out of the cafe during peak hours. Today, however, felt different. The air was thick with an unspoken tension, and she had a feeling it wasn't just the rain clouds gathering outside. Then the door swung open, and in walked Mark. Mark was trouble, a middle-aged man in a tailored suit with the air of someone who believed he was better than anyone else in the room. He was one of those customers that every barista dreaded, impatient, condescending, and always ready to make a scene. Jasmine had dealt with him before, but today he seemed particularly agitated. The moment he stepped inside, the mood in the cafe seemed to shift. He strutted up to the counter, his eyes scanning the menu as if it were beneath him. Jasmine braced herself. She could feel his annoyance before he even spoke. "You, again," Mark muttered under his breath, loud enough for Jasmine to hear. "Do they not have anyone more competent working here?" Jasmine smiled politely, even as her heart sank. "Good afternoon, Mark. What can I get started for you today?" Mark rolled his eyes. "Get me a venti mocha latte, extra hot, 3 shots of espresso, no whip, and make it. Fast." "This time. Last time you were so slow I thought I'd die of old age." Jasmine nodded, refusing to let his words get under her skin. "Of course. 1 venti mocha latte coming right up." As she turned to prepare the drink, she could feel his eyes on her, scrutinizing her every move, waiting for her to make a mistake. The other customers in the cafe noticed too, their glances filled with discomfort, but no one said a word. "Unbelievable," Mark muttered again. "Can't find good help anywhere these days, and look at this place, it's full of idiots." Jasmine's fingers twitched as she tightened her grip on the espresso machine's handle. She wasn't new to this kind of treatment. In fact, she had encountered it far too often. People who assumed she was just a nobody, a lowly barista they could talk down to because of her race, her gender, or simply because they thought she wasn't worthy of respect. But Jasmine had learned long ago to rise above it. What they didn't know about her would be their undoing. She quickly finished the drink and handed it to Mark with a smile. "Here you go. Venti mocha latte, just how you like it." Mark grabbed the cup without so much as a thank you, sneering at her. "I'll be amazed if you didn't mess this up. Probably too busy thinking about your nails or whatever it is girls like you worry about." Jasmine's smile faltered for a split second, but she recovered, standing tall. "I hope you enjoy your drink," she said evenly, refusing to rise to his bait. Just as Mark was about to walk away, he took a sip of his latte and froze. His eyes narrowed, and he stormed back to the counter. "What the hell is this?" he barked. "Did you hear a word I said? I asked for extra hot. This is barely warm." Jasmine frowned slightly. "I'm sorry about that. Let me remake it for you." "Don't bother," Mark snapped. "You wouldn't know how to do your job, even if someone spelled it out for you. People like you should stick to what you're good at, whatever that is." The cafe had gone silent. Customers stared at Mark, then glanced at Jasmine, clearly uncomfortable with the way he was treating her. Jasmine could feel the heat of their stares, but she kept her head high. She wasn't going to let him get to her. As Jasmine was about to apologize again, her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. It was a quick message from her father, reminding her about a meeting later that day. She quickly replied, assuring him she'd be there. In her rush, she didn't realize Mark was still watching her closely. "Who do you think you are, texting on the job?" Mark sneered. "Maybe that's why you can't even make a cup of coffee right. Too busy playing on your phone. This is exactly what's wrong with people today." Jasmine took a slow breath, the tension building inside her. This time, she didn't smile. "I'm very sorry, sir, but I'll have to ask you to calm down. I've remade your drink, and if you have further complaints, I'll gladly get the manager." Mark scoffed, his face turning red with frustration. "Manager? I don't need to talk to some underqualified, overpaid manager. You people are all the same, lazy, useless, and good for nothing but standing behind a counter." Jasmine stood still, her heart racing. She wanted to respond, wanted to tell him that his assumptions about her were not just wrong, but insulting. But she had promised herself she wouldn't lose her cool, no matter how demeaning the situation became. Still, her resolve was being tested. At that moment, the cafe's manager, Lisa, stepped out from the back. She had overheard the commotion and could tell something was wrong. Lisa was a short, blonde woman with a no-nonsense attitude, and she wasn't about to let anyone bully her staff. Is there a problem here? Lisa asked, stepping up beside Jasmine. Mark turned to her, his face twisted in annoyance. Yeah, there's a problem. Your employee can't seem to make a decent cup of coffee and has the nerve to act like I'm the one being unreasonable. Lisa raised an eyebrow, glancing at Jasmine, who gave her a small nod. I see, she said carefully. Well, I apologize if the service wasn't up to your standards, but I would ask that you treat our staff with respect. Respect? Mark let out a bitter laugh. You want me to respect someone who can't even do their job? You must be joking. Lisa's expression hardened. Jasmine is one of our best baristas, and I won't tolerate anyone speaking to her, or any of our staff, that way. For a moment, it seemed like Mark might back down, but then, in a fit of frustration, he threw the barely touched coffee into the trash and glared at Jasmine. You won't last long in this world, sweetheart. People like you never do. Before Jasmine could respond, her phone buzzed again. This time, Mark caught a glimpse of the message flashing on her screen. It was a reminder from her father about the meeting later at Caldwell Enterprises, one of the largest corporations in the city. Mark's eyes flickered with recognition. Caldwell Enterprises, he asked, his tone suddenly curious. Why would someone like you be texting with them? Jasmine hesitated, realizing he had seen the message. She could tell from his expression that his interest had been piqued, but she wasn't ready to reveal the truth just yet. I'm meeting with someone later, she said vaguely, hoping that would satisfy his curiosity. But of course, it didn't. Mark's eyes narrowed as he stepped closer, his demeanor shifting from anger to suspicion. Meeting with someone? A barista like you? At Caldwell Enterprises? Don't make me laugh. Jasmine didn't respond, simply turning away to help the next customer, but Mark wasn't done. You must know someone there, huh? Maybe a friend in low places. No way someone like you has any real connections. Lisa stepped forward, about to escort Mark out of the cafe, when the door opened once more, and a tall man in a sharp, expensive suit walked in. He scanned the room before his eyes landed on Jasmine, and a warm smile spread across his face. Jasmine, he called out, his voice loud enough for the entire cafe to hear. Mark turned around, confusion washing over his face as the man approached Jasmine and gave her a hug. I hope I'm not interrupting your shift too much. We've got that meeting at 3 p.m., remember? Jasmine smiled, visibly relieved to see him. Of course, I'll be there. The entire cafe was silent as the man turned to Lisa and nodded politely before addressing Jasmine again. Your father mentioned that today's meeting is important. Caldwell Enterprises is looking forward to your input. Mark's jaw dropped. What? He stammered, completely caught off guard. Her father? The man smiled, not noticing Mark's confusion. Yes, her father. He's eager to hear your thoughts on the expansion plans for Caldwell Enterprises, Jasmine. You've always had an eye for strategy. Jasmine nodded, maintaining her composed demeanor despite the growing tension in the room. The moment of revelation was approaching, and the shift in Mark's expression made it clear that he was beginning to realize just how wrong he had been. Lisa, the cafe manager, looked at Jasmine with a mix of pride and surprise, though she'd known bits of Jasmine's story. The other customers had fallen completely silent, some casting glances at Mark, eager to see how this would unfold. Mark swallowed hard, his arrogance evaporating as reality set in. Jasmine Caldwell. The young black barista he had belittled was the daughter of the CEO of Caldwell Enterprises, one of the wealthiest and most powerful businessmen in the city. Not only that, but she was apparently heavily involved in the family business, far more than anyone, especially Mark, could have guessed. Jasmine's colleague stepped forward to take over the counter, allowing her to step aside and speak to the man in the suit, her father's trusted associate. They talked in hushed tones about logistics and schedules for the upcoming meeting, but as they spoke, Jasmine could feel Mark's stunned gaze still lingering on her. She turned back to him, her eyes meeting his. You, Mark stammered, his usual confidence completely shattered. You're Caldwell's daughter? The Caldwell? Jasmine gave a slight nod. Yes, but that doesn't change anything about what just happened. Mark's face turned pale as he realized the weight of his actions. He had insulted, belittled, and harassed the daughter of one of the most powerful men in the city, and now there was no way to take it back. The smug entitlement he had walked in with had been wiped clean, replaced by an awkward, panicked energy. I didn't know, Mark stammered, desperately trying to salvage the situation. If I had known, I would never have... Jasmine held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. Exactly. If you had known who I was, you would have treated me with respect. But here's the thing, Mark. I'm not asking for respect because of my father's status or my involvement in the company. Respect shouldn't be conditional on someone's title or wealth. It's something everyone deserves, whether they're a CEO, a janitor, or a barista. Mark opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. His face flushed with embarrassment as the weight of Jasmine's words sank in. The entire cafe was watching now, and the silence was thick with anticipation. Mark's usual smugness had been replaced by an air of desperation, and for the first time since he had walked into the cafe, he was the one who felt small. Jasmine continued, her voice calm but firm. People like you think you can treat others poorly because you assume they're beneath you. You didn't even see me as a person. But you know what? It doesn't matter what job I have, where I come from, or who my father is. What matters is how you treat people, period. Mark's eyes darted around the room looking for a way out. I'm sorry, he finally blurted out. I didn't mean to... I wasn't trying to... Jasmine nodded. I understand, but let's be clear. Your apology doesn't mean much if it's only coming because you found out who I am. If you truly regret how you acted, maybe you should think about how you treat people every day, not just the ones you think can benefit you. Mark's face was now a deep shade of red. He looked down at the floor, utterly defeated. There was nothing left for him to say, no more excuses to make. Lisa, the manager, stepped forward. Mark, I think it's time for you to leave, she said firmly. We won't tolerate this kind of behavior here. Without another word, Mark turned and hurried out of the cafe, his head hung low. The door swung shut behind him, and the tension that had gripped the cafe finally began to ease. A few moments passed in silence before the regular customers slowly began whispering to one another, some casting impressed glances at Jasmine, while others muttered about how Mark had gotten exactly what he deserved. Jasmine, for her part, remained poised, though the weight of the moment was not lost on her. The man in the suit, her father's associate, smiled at her. I'll see you at the meeting, he said softly. Your father will be proud to hear how you handled yourself today. Jasmine gave a small nod. Thanks, she said, her voice soft but steady. As the man exited the cafe, Jasmine turned back to Lisa, who gave her a proud smile. You did good, Jasmine. Real good. Jasmine smiled back. Thanks, Lisa. I just wanted to make sure he understood. He definitely did, Lisa said, nodding. I think you taught him a lesson he won't forget anytime soon. Jasmine looked around the cafe, where the atmosphere had returned to its usual lively hum. The customers were back to their conversations, and the staff had resumed their work. For a moment, Jasmine just stood there, taking it all in. She had always known that people like Mark existed, people who would look down on her because of the color of her skin, her job, or just because they thought they were better than everyone else. But today, she had stood up not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been treated the way Mark had treated her. In the end, it wasn't about her secret identity or her father's status. It was about something much bigger, about reminding people that dignity and respect are not privileges to be earned, but rights that belong to everyone. As Jasmine tied her apron back on and returned to the counter, a warmth settled over her. She might be the daughter of a CEO, but today she was proud to be just Jasmine, the barista who demanded respect, not because of her connections, but because she, like everyone else, deserved it. And that was more than enough.